What is our post-pandemic world going to look like? Several of us here at Tomorrow's World have noted that the greatest legacy of COVID-19 may not be in the number of deaths, the number of people being sick, but it will be economic and geopolitical. And as we go forward, I think that all of us see that there are signs of real trouble on the world scene when it comes to the economies of many nations. Here in the United States, we have 35 million people who have lost their jobs. We see trillions of dollars being basically printed to help people feed their families, to pay employees for a very short period of time, just a few weeks. And then what happens? Now they're talking about another $3 trillion. Folks, we're talking about serious money here. And other countries are doing the same thing. They're just struggling to keep afloat. I saw yesterday a picture, an aerial photograph, not a photograph, but an aerial video of a long line in South Africa with hundreds, maybe thousands of people waiting in line to get foodstuffs. It was interesting because you couldn't see the beginning of the line and you couldn't see the end of it. But they were double abreast or more, and they were walking slowly, walk and stop, waiting in line, just to feed themselves and their families. So the economic impact and the starvation that is causing in some places is very clear for anyone who has eyes to see. But what about the geopolitical? When economies fail, the end result is that geopolitical changes take place. Different leaders come to the fore. Various leaders fall and others rise up. And oftentimes, this is when strong leaders come to the fore. And they may be good leaders, or they may be Hitler or Mussolini. This is the reality of the world in which we live. I'd like to talk about Europe a little bit, because those of us who are here on this side of the pond, as we sometimes call it, in North America, don't take Europe seriously enough. Perhaps in Australia, New Zealand, and the Philippines, there are other places around the world that perhaps it's the same way. Perhaps in Africa, they don't think too much about Europe. But we have to remember that in the last century, 2 wars were fought in Europe that dragged the rest of the world into the war. The Second World War claimed casualties of anywhere from 40 to 70. It depends on which source you go to, but as many as 70 million lives as a result of what happened in Europe. We cannot take Europe for granted. The Europeans, recognizing the problem of the First World War and the Second World War, set out to change it, change the dynamics. And so in the early 50s, 6 countries came together: Germany, France, Italy, and the Benelux countries, Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg, and formed the European Coal and Steel Community. That was the beginning, and it eventually morphed into something a little bit more than that, eventually the European Economic Community, and finally the European Union. And that 6 nations grew to 28 nations. But in recent years, the European Union has been struggling, and many wonder if it can hold together. Just think about the European debt crisis. And we heard just not too long ago about Greece in terrible financial trouble. There are actually several countries that were in trouble. They call them the pigs. That sounds rather derogatory, but it's an acronym for Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, and Spain. Those countries are struggling, the southern nations, whereas the northern nations were much more prosperous. And there was a bit of a tug of war between the north and the south. Then we had the mass of hordes invading Europe. And I say invading, I don't mean with guns and military weapons, but people struggling just to get away from where they were, getting away from the Syrian civil war and Iraq and Afghanistan and places like that. North Africa, Libya, Tunisia, other places in Africa. And so hordes of people began to stream into Europe by the thousands, by the millions. And as the nations realized they could not handle such masses coming into their country, to feed them, to clothe them, to take care of them, until they were able to work into jobs, one country after another began to pull apart. And Germany took a large number of them, but even within Germany, people were beginning to complain. And so this was beginning to fracture the nations of Europe. The reality of Brexit took hold finally. In June of 2016, the British referendum took place, and the Brits decided to pull out of Europe. A very stabilizing force, although there were always tensions between the mainland continental countries and Britain, but nevertheless, they voted to get out. And while many nations really did not want that to happen, nevertheless, January 31st of this year, it actually happened. They voted to go out, and they have officially done so on January 31st. And right on the heels of that, we have COVID-19, something that nobody predicted. They were worried about what would happen with the United Kingdom. Would it stay together? Would Scotland pull away and go independent? The same thing for Ireland. Germany was already struggling financially, and other nations in Europe. And so the question was, what would happen once they are fully out toward the end of this year? They're out. But nevertheless, they're still trying to work out some of the details, and they have to the end of this year to work that out. What is going to happen there? COVID-19 threw a monkey wrench in everything. It was the, quote, black swan event of the century in reality. Nobody could have predicted this, other than the fact that we know that disease epidemics are coming. And we actually predicted that they would come, but nobody knew when they would come or when this event would come and exactly how it would take place. But it has. And so what's going to happen in Europe? Well, here at Tomorrow's World, we've been talking about Europe literally for decades. I mean, many decades. But we have talked about 10 nations that are going to rise up in Europe. Not 28, not 27, but 10 nations are going to pull together. And we base that on a prophecy that is found in the Bible. And I'd like to read that from Daniel, the 2nd chapter, beginning in verse 40. And here we see that Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, and he saw this great image with a head of gold, the chest and arms of silver, the belly and thighs of brass, and the legs of iron, and the feet partly of iron and partly of ceramic clay. And what we find here, because it tells us exactly what it is, and that is that the head of gold was the Babylonian Empire, the empire of Nebuchadnezzar. But after him would come another empire, and then another one, and then another. The second one was the Medo-Persian Empire, which overthrew Babylon. And then the Greco-Macedonian Empire under Alexander the Great overthrew the Persian Empire. And finally the Roman Empire came. And this is where we pick it up, talking about this fourth empire. It says, the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything. And like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all the others. Whereas you saw the feet and toes partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. Yet the strength of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay. Well, certainly the Roman Empire was a powerful empire, iron empire, you might say. But other prophecies show that it would go through a transition, that it would fall, and it would rise again, and there would be 7 restorations of it under a religious authority or in combination with a religious authority, the Holy Roman Empire. And we have followed that and seen that there were 6 restorations. The last one, Hitler and Mussolini. But there's another one that is on the horizon that will rise up. And notice it says, because this last one is made up of the 10 toes, the feet and the toes are made of clay and iron. It says, as the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile. And that's what we see. We see Europe trying to come together, trying to coalesce as a power. But it's very fragile. And why is it fragile? Well, the verse tells us. As you saw iron mixed with clay, they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. And then it says, in the days of these kings, the kings that are represented by the 10 toes, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. So it takes this empire, this Roman Empire, all the way down to the return of Jesus Christ. That's really what it's saying there. The days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which will never be destroyed, a very different kingdom, one which a stone is cut out without hands will smash the feet of this image. Now we take it over to the book of Revelation, and it describes this seventh beast, this seventh restoration. And it says in verse 12, Revelation 17, verses 12 through 14, the 10 horns, because now they're described as horns on this beast, no longer as toes, but horns on the beast, but the number is the same, and it's talking about the same thing. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have received no kingdom as yet, but they receive authority for 1 hour with the beast. In other words, for a very short time. These are of one mind, and they will give their power and authority to the beast. What is it that's going to cause nations to give their power over to another? Very clearly, some kind of a crisis, whether it be economic or whether it be invasion from the south, which we know that there are other prophecies that talk about that. But some kind of a crisis is going to occur where a very strong leader who will solve the problems is going to rise up, and these 10 kings are going to give their power and authority over to this individual that is called the beast. They will make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them. So just as Daniel talked about God setting up a kingdom at the time of the end of the fourth great kingdom, the 10 toes, we see here that these are going to make war with the Lamb, with Jesus Christ, at his return. And yet he is going to overcome them and set up that kingdom. These are the things that we have believed for a long time and know are going to happen according to Bible prophecy. And these are things that could happen a lot more quickly than we expect. We're not saying it's going to happen tomorrow, but this economic and geopolitical crisis that is affecting this world, and especially affecting Europe, could have significant ramifications. So we need to keep watching that and look for 10 nations to give their power over to another. That's what we're looking for down the road. If you are interested, we do have a booklet, a resource on this subject. It's free of charge. We have nothing to sell here. And if you'd like to go to the website, you probably know of our website or you wouldn't be here right now. But our website, www.tomorrowsworld.org, and you can read it there or download it, or you can actually just give us a note and say you'd like a free copy of the booklet that talks about the Beast of Revelation. We'd be more than happy to get that to you. So no obligation, it's just available in case you want it. Be sure to subscribe to our Tomorrow's World website and give us a like and hit the bell if you'd like so that you get these notifications when we have a new one coming out. This is Gerald Wesson for Tomorrow's World. It's May the 18th, 2020. Have a wonderful day.